Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. It's time for today's Talkback segment. Each day, we post a question on Court TV's social media pages. We gather your comments and questions and then respond right here on the show. Today, we asked if you think the jury in the McMichaels and Bryant trial will be able to separate race from the facts like the Chauvin jury said they did. Still with me, Los Angeles County Deputy Public Defender Philip Dube. All right, Philip, our first comment comes from Kimberly. She says, I don't know. I think it's going to be much harder in Ahmaud's case to say that race didn't have anything to do with it when the shooter is heard calling him the N-word right after he shot him. That's not a good look for the shooter. She makes an excellent point, Philip. Race is in this trial. Even though it was a subtext in the Chauvin trial, it's actually in this trial because of that very word. What do you think about that?
No, I actually agree with you. I think it's going to be a problem for the defendants in this case. And by the way, it's eerily similar to the Trayvon Martin shooting. Do you remember where you had George Zimmerman pursuing Trayvon in a homeowners association in his capacity as a civilian? He wasn't a cop or associated at all with law enforcement. He was sort of a self-appointed neighborhood watch type guy. And then, you know, he sees what he perceives to be a prowler, follows him, and the next thing he knows, they're in a tussle, you know, for his life. His head was getting bashed, according to the evidence, into the concrete, and he shot at him. That's a far cry from this. The real similarity, though, is that you basically had a Latino on a black guy. George was Hispanic, I believe. Aside from the fact that you do have a black victim, what you have in the Aubrey homicide is all the pejorative terms used about blacks. And then, of course, you have that darn Confederate flag bumper sticker. If both of those come into evidence, they're going to have to explain that away.
Yeah, we're still waiting to find out, actually, if that will be allowed to come into evidence. And it's interesting that you made the comparison there to the Zimmerman case. We've had Mark O'Mara on the show. He's talked about it. Ben Crump even mentioned it. But he said what was different in this case from the Zimmerman case is now we have video. So he thinks that might change the outcome of the case. All right, let's move on to our next comment here, Philip. It comes from Christy, and she says, I don't know if that's possible because it seems like one of the facts is that it happened because he was black. Race and facts seem to be one and the same on this one. That's interesting. I'm not so sure if that's the case, but I can tell you this. The whole N-word thing came in because of statements from William Roddy Bryan. William Roddy Bryan is a co-defendant of these other men. I think it puts him in an interesting position, especially since we're finding out that the McMichaels are actually having what they're calling a unified defense. One attorney for both sides will be doing some of the questioning. It has a lot of logistics, but it's an interesting point. So I want to get your thoughts on the particular position of William Roddy Bryan, considering he provides that N-word for this prosecution.
No, it's definitely problematic for him. I think what's going to be very fact-specific in this case is whether or not the neighborhood was mixed. In other words, was this predominantly a white neighborhood? Was it also a black neighborhood? If it was predominantly white and you're not accustomed to seeing black people, then it does kind of raise suspicions to Whitey, not to sound crass, that you see a black kid walking around in the neighborhood. It goes back to what I said earlier. If this were a white guy in a trench coat with a Wall Street Journal walking into that construction site looking around, I'm not sure that all three of these men would have chased him down, taken that rifle, and shot him to make a citizen's arrest.
Fair enough. And you know, what's interesting is there are a lot of people online who suggest that this breadth of knowledge that apparently the McMichaels say they had about all these other break-ins in the area, they had seen them 3 or 4 different times on video in that house under construction. When you start putting that all together, I've seen people online suggesting that could be enough to say, okay, it was all right for them to then try to perform this citizen's arrest.
Listen, I don't want to give off any type of virtue signaling. That's not how I roll, quite frankly. But listen, let's just pretend that really is the case. He happens to be black. He happens to be going on and into properties. I do think that they would have a justifiable probable cause to try to detain him under the then Georgia private citizens arrest law. They would have been fully within their rights to do it. The only question is whether or not they had the right to do it with a gun because Ahmaud was unarmed. Why couldn't they just chase him, pin him down? You know, if they had to use a little bit of physical force with their hands, their elbows to try to restrain him, okay, I understand. But did you have to bring a weapon to what would otherwise just be a pushing match?
Yeah,
That's going to be the problem.
That's the question for the jury. All right, Philip Dube, I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening. Truly appreciate you joining us and filling in tonight. We'll see you again soon down the road, I am sure. I'm Michael Ayala. It's been a pleasure being with all of you as well. Coming up next in closing arguments, Vinnie Politan takes a look